Alright guys, so I thought this would be a fun little NFL video format. It's random players putting up huge numbers. I wanted to title this video NPC players having massive games or something, just random players. I don't know what I'll title it, but it is an interesting thing to look back on. And I'm mainly going to be focusing on recent history, not going back to the 50s and 60s, because we didn't know a lot of those players anyways. This is more so like from 2009 until now. The furthest one back is actually the first one, 2009. It was the Browns and Chiefs. And how about Jerome Harrison going off? This was like the third biggest rushing yards total in a single game. 286 rushing yards on 34 carries and 3 touchdowns. Look at this game though. The Browns and the Chiefs, when both of these teams were terrible. This is just a miserable football game. 3-11 versus 3-11. Matt Castle had a decent game. How about Brady Quinn going for 66 total yards, 2 interceptions, but the Browns still score 41 points because Jerome Harrison randomly goes crazy. Imagine a fantasy day like this. Remember, back in 2009, there really was no PPR. So 286 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. That's like one of the biggest fantasy performances in history. Now you've got the joke PPR points where you get like 10 or 11 receptions. It adds to it. But yeah, just a crazy random game there. The next random player, it is Doug Martin. And there are 2 different Doug Martin games that are pretty crazy. The first one happened right around Halloween. And I vividly remember coming back home from trick-or-treating. This might have been my final year I went trick-or-treating, and Doug Martin was on the NFL Red Zone screen, and it was like, whoa, Doug Martin goes for 251, 4 touchdowns. The Oakland Raiders, that had to have been Carson Palmer's last year with the Raiders in 2013, because this game was in 2013, but yeah, crazy game. Josh Freeman. I remember when people thought Josh Freeman was going to be a franchise quarterback. This game was on Fox. Kind of a rarity for the Oakland Raiders to be on Fox. But that's, you have an NFC team going to an AFC team. That's how the TV rights were. Kind of a sunny game, 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Oakland Coliseum. And you got the nice shadows there. Very high scoring, 42-32. The Raiders scored a bunch of garbage time points in that one. And then the second Doug Martin game happened I think 2 years later in 2015. Tampa Bay traveling to Philadelphia. You remember Philadelphia, the Chip Kelly era with Mark Sanchez? I mean, they had one good season, but yeah, this year they got crushed in this game, and they were 4-5. The Eagles were. Mark Sanchez, the 3 interceptions. DeMarco Murray. What a strange situation, DeMarco Murray. He has that crazy big breakout year. He ends up going to the Eagles and just immediately becoming washed. Seems like that happens with running backs a lot, but either way, Doug Martin goes for 177 yards in the first half, finishes 27 carries, 235, but 0 touchdowns, believe it or not. 0 touchdowns. But yes, Doug Martin had several crazy games throughout his early career. Moving on to the next random player, it is Beanie Wells, the former Ohio State Buckeye, the former top 5 overall player in his recruiting class. He had a great career at Ohio State. He was picked 28th overall by the Arizona Cardinals. And this game, going all the way back to 2011, they beat the then St. Louis Rams and Sam Bradford. And Beanie Wells goes for 228 and 1 touchdown. They win that game. They only score 23 points, but Beanie Wells has 228 yards. That's because John Skelton was just terrible again. That's another game with him where he's just horrible. He's a real, it is kind of a low blow at him. I'm gonna let up on him a little bit, but Beanie Wells with a crazy game there, 228 in the Edwards Jones Dome. That place is a dump, and it still is around. Now it's called like the Stadium in America Center or something. Moving on to the next one. Oh, this is just a brutal game. You remember games like this? The Jaguars-Browns, when both of these teams were just terrible. The Browns sitting at 4-8, the Jaguars at 3-9. You did have Josh Gordon. I guess Josh Gordon's really not a random player, considering a lot of people know him. He ended up going to the Patriots. He tried to resurrect himself with the Seahawks. He goes for 261 and 2 touchdowns. The Browns lose this game. Brandon Weeden goes for 370. and Chad Henne, 40 pass attempts, 195 yards. Willis McGahee was beyond washed by this point. But yeah, Josh Gordon had just a crazy 2013 year, and everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing. He ends up getting suspended to start 2014, and he was really never the same after that. Moving on to the next game, there are two different random performances in this one. How about Matt Schaub and Justin Blackmon? Matt Schaub, 527 passing yards, the second most passing yards in a single game in NFL history, which is very surprising to me. It seems like such a low number nowadays. I do remember Drew Brees having 370 passing yards in a first half of a game, but I think they just ran the ball in the second half because they were up by so much. But yeah, Matt Schaub with a crazy game. Houston at this point was 9-1, but they barely beat 1-9 Jacksonville in overtime by a touchdown. And Justin Blackmon, very similar story to Josh Gordon, couldn't stay on the field, was a crazy talent at Oklahoma State. I think he won the Biletnikoff Award for the nation's best receiver twice. He was crazy. 7 catches, 236. Andre Johnson had 273. There were just crazy numbers in that game all around. Moving on to the next one. Oh, this was Derek Carr's big year with the Oakland Raiders when the Raiders were like 12-4. Yeah, this game went to overtime. Derek Carr, 59 pass attempts, 4 touchdowns, 513 yards. Crazy numbers. Amari Cooper, 12 catches, 173 and a touchdown. It was a nice little sunny day there in that one. And then you also do have Brian Hartline's random crazy 200 receiving yard game back in like 2011. Brian Hartline now is best known, as Ohio State's receiver coach. He's one of the best recruiters in the country, but he was also a decent player. He played well at Ohio State, and his NFL career, it's just kind of random that Brian Hartline had a crazy over 200-yard game. That was just a random little matchup there between Miami and Arizona. And then how about a defensive player? Yes, Adrian Clayborn. This was back 2017. This was like Matt Ryan's final year where he was actually decent. You had Atlanta win this game 27-7. Adrian Clayborn, 6 sacks. I mean, 3 sacks is just a ridiculous total for a game. For an individual player, 4 sacks is absurd. 6 sacks for an individual one player, it's ridiculous. Adrian Clayborn, kind of a decent defensive player, but really just random there. The next one, it is Alshon Jeffrey. Remember when Alshon Jeffrey was a number 1 receiver back in 2013? 12 catches, 249 yards. Josh McCown. Josh McCown was considered an elite quarterback for the second half. Mark Trestman, the QB whisperer, yeah. Adrian Peterson goes for 211 yards. Kind of an interesting game back there. It went to overtime with the Vikings winning, and then another random player, Marvin Jones Jr. This was, I want to say, in 2015 maybe. You had the Packers go up in this game 31-3 mid-second quarter, and then Matt Stafford with those Lions teams, he would always get so many garbage yards late in the game. I do like Matt Stafford, though. I liked Matt Stafford before he went to the Rams and won a ring, but Marvin Jones Jr., he was never a possession receiver. He had 6 catches, 2 touchdowns, 205 yards. Never a good PPR guy, but kind of a random situation there. And then another random player that had a career game, Mike White. Believe it or not, on Halloween in 2021, Mike White beat Joe Burrow 34-31. How about Michael Carter randomly coming out of nowhere? 9 catches, 95 yards, but Mike White, 405 passing yards, out-dueling Burrow, and they won that game. That was very shocking. But guys, those are just some random players having crazy career games. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.